Welcome, everybody. Let's get straight into it. Rod, the burning question, how is the recovery going?
Well, you couldn't have a more dramatic recovery after a more dramatic fall off. And so over the last 3 surveys, the number of companies that have been reporting revenue growth, not profit growth, but revenue growth has gone from 10% a year ago to about 45% to about 88%. So a dramatic recovery over a 12-month period.
And in terms of the sectors who were hit hardest and who bounced back most dramatically, any insights there?
That's a little bit harder to predict sometimes because we ask people to nominate all of the sectors they work in. And so they might be an IT company that does business support, for example. And so the results are more of an indication than something absolute. I used to get very excited about the small variations that we're showing for each sector, but over the last 18 months, it's just been dramatic fall and then dramatic rise, and really everything has floated up. Having said that, we know that a lot of sectors really struggled with the lockdown, so tourism and hospitality, for example, and some sectors just got unbelievably complex, like health, which was probably unexpected. So they were shutting down elective surgery and obviously a demand for other areas of health. And then there were some sectors that just absolutely flowed through, like IT has had a great 18 months and will probably continue to have that into the future.
So quite a dramatic bounce back in ANZ. Adam Pode, I mean, how does this compare to other regions that you're working across globally?
Well, listening to Rod, I think a lot of the trends that he's seeing in Australia are being seen around the world. In 2020, we reckoned that the market fell overall 11%. That's the bad news. The good news is that we think the market will grow 12% this year. Now, a lot of this is based on, there's an element of rounding in this. So we reckon 0% growth in 2019 overall. Now, how does that compare with Australia? We reckon that Australia fell a smidgen more than the global revenue at 12%, minus 12% growth last year. And we reckon it will grow just a smidgen less than the global, our global forecast at 11% this year. New Zealand, obviously, lockdown came in a lot faster. And we reckon last year the market fell 7%, but this year it'll grow 10%. So an interesting pattern.
So Nigel, 2020 was obviously an anomaly, one that we kind of hope doesn't hit us again for at least a few more years. We all came out of it alive, thank God. So the survey covers the first half of 2021. Can you provide a benchmark of how the first half of this year compares to previous years, pre-2020?
Yeah, we've had consistency of participants all the way through. Of course, we've lost a few along the way. Benchmarking doesn't guarantee your survival. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Well, it's been really interesting. If we look at the first 6 months of 2020, it really was two different periods. The first quarter of 2020 was holding up substantially well. January, February, March. Then, of course, COVID really kicked in from April. And then April, May, and June, that one quarter fell 55% on perm sales. And so quarter one was okay, quarter two, not so good. So that first 6 months was 26% down on perms. Slightly different when we look at the first 6 months of this year on perms. Totally different. I daren't say it, but COVID's been a good thing for some of those in the industry. We've seen perms now bounce back to a record high in March. And that's quarter by quarter, month by month, really since September of last year. perms have just been skyrocketing to the point where, this year, first 6 months, perms will be up 55% on the same time last year. And we still got more June figures to come in, which I think are likely to show that 50 to 60% improvement on the first 6 months on perms.
My goodness.
Unbelievable.
And how about on the temp and contract side, Nigel?
Temp and contract, when I said it really didn't feel the pain, we have to put to one side those that really got hit, hospitality and catering, and some of the health sectors. Others in IT and some white collar and certainly some blue collar have done well. And so when we look at the average across the region, temp sales were averaging per month, per company, around 1.5 mil a month, January, February, March of 2020. COVID kicked in. April, the average rose. It dropped a little in May and has been rising every month since. It's come off the ball a little bit in the last couple of months. But overall, growth of 18% temp sales this year on last year on that first 6 months. I don't think any of us could have believed that there could be such a quick turnaround. I expected to see consistency in life in temp and contracting, but not the voracious appetite there is for perms.
And thank goodness we have seen this bounce back compared to 12 months ago. It was a pretty dark place, wasn't it, for our industry? Before we get ahead of ourselves though, okay, first 6 months has been incredible, extremely positive. What's the forecast like for the rest of the year? Maybe one for you, Rod. How does the future looking according to our respondents of the survey?
Yeah, so the recruitment industry, the people who respond to my survey are normally very bullish about things, and there's actually a disparity between what they predict and what they actually do. So that's probably to be expected, human nature and all those things.
Gotta love the optimism, eh?
You've got to love the optimism. However, back in December, so 6 months ago, people were predicting, almost universally that there would be revenue growth, and they achieved that. And interestingly, in this survey, so 6 months later, they have a slightly less optimistic. So maybe some of the real hardships that are in the marketplace, like lack of talent, lack of ability to get that internal growth, are actually starting to bite. And there's a percentage of owners out there now who are saying, I'm not sure we can actually continue this growth out into the future. I'm not sure if it's impacted by external things like more lockdowns and continuing COVID problems and borders being shut and so on. But there's just a little dampening of enthusiasm compared to 6 months ago.
Adam, would you say that outlook is kind of in line with what you're seeing across other markets? Optimism, but tempered.
Just as Nigel's been pointing out, we've seen a considerable bounce back. Next year, I just don't think that that's going to maintain quite the same level. So globally, we think that revenue will increase 8% in 2022. How does that compare with Australia? Well, it's slightly less good in Australia at 6% growth, we think, next year. And New Zealand, funnily enough, comes in at exactly the same figure as the global number at 8%. So it's positive, it's growing. Those sorts of figures 5 years ago, we would have thought, wow, that's fantastic. It's just after the figures that we're getting this year, it's not quite as good.
And so what are businesses telling you, Rod? What do they see as their greatest opportunity for growth right now?
All the way through the last 4 years, that hasn't changed. And the number one opportunity that people see for growth is to sort of grow within their existing customers. And that makes sense from a practical point of view as well as an academic point of view. It's actually cheaper and less risk to sell more of your existing product to your existing customers. And that's number one. The other areas that people see around growth are the risk relationship with clients. In other words, selling more retained services. And certainly we saw a huge push towards that. So as perm started to pick up, most recruiters were actually jumping in and saying, I'll do this for you compared to all of the other opportunities I've got, but you need to retain me to do that, or at least give it to me exclusively. So that pushed ahead. There was opportunities in marketing, and social media continues to be a high priority in Australia, I think less so overseas. And then a whole range of things around internal, strengthening internal growth, like hiring more staff, getting staff productive, putting more training in and so on. So that group of profit opportunities, if you like, or growth opportunities haven't really changed, but the priority does change a little bit.
I mean, you can't move on LinkedIn. Well, I feel like I can't move on LinkedIn without some recruitment agency, scrambling to hire. In ANZ, are we seeing them tending to hire more junior consultants, or are they still tending to want the more experienced consultants? Has that changed due to COVID?
That hasn't really changed. Both are higher priority, although if I can talk about a barrier to growth, if I can jump ahead. And
absolutely.
Because one of the things that always amuses me about the survey, and it's almost the first thing I look when I get the results, is because there's a great deal of honesty amongst the people who provide the answers to the survey. They see one of the greatest opportunities for profit growth is to hire more experienced consultants, but they see one of the barriers to their profit growth in the future is the fact that there's no experienced consultants to hire. And they've said that for 8 surveys. So I do enjoy the fact that they're honest and repeat that every time.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, dare I say.
And look, right at the moment, those personal opinion now, as opposed to survey results, I think those organisations that have not invested in alternate ways of getting growth within their organisation other than hiring experienced consultants are really going to have a tough year, because that's just not a winning strategy when there's no, such a shortage of talent in the marketplace.
It's really shone a light, hasn't it, COVID, on those firms who have patchy internal training programs, or a bad pipeline of social kind of engagement to kind of get the new consultants through.
Well, we have a great relationship with the UK, especially, and Ireland and other places, and get a lot of experienced consultants from those places, and the borders are closed. So not only do we lose consultants going back to their home environment, but we're not getting the fresh consultants into the country. So, whatever's in the country is what you've got to play with, and they're all busy.
And what other barriers of growth are privately owned firms in ANZ really clamouring about, Rod?
Certainly access to candidates is the number one, and that's obviously disappeared for a couple of surveys, but is back to number one. And the other issues are really varied. They seem to be the top issues all the time, but they shuffle around a little bit. Access to major clients. So if you're a smaller organisation, you find it difficult to get into major organisations because of procurement processes and so on. Competing with internal recruitment. So if you're dealing with medium to large organisations, internal recruitment is almost seen as your number one competitor. Getting consultants productive. And for the smaller clients, for the smaller organisations, actually finding time to work on the business is a continual focus for those smaller companies. I mean, recruitment is a very, very busy place, and a lot of consultants a lot of owners find it hard to actually draw themselves out of the business and work on the business.
It's quite interesting, actually, when I was digesting the survey results, that by far, the greatest barrier to growth people are feeling is this, we're in a candidate short market. And how long do you think that's going to last for? Open question. All you gentlemen are very experienced, chip in. How long are we going to be in this candidate short market for? Any ideas?
Eloise, if you're looking, it's interesting to hear the experience of Australia and New Zealand, because the experience in the UK at the moment is exactly the same. The number one issue is candidate shortages. And the difficulty you have, particularly in, say, IT, is there's never enough Java programmers. It's always been a problem. However much people get trained, however much training academies come into place to try and fill the gap, it just seems like there are never enough programmers of the right variety that people are looking at. So the interesting one, though, is as the UK market has opened up, Rob was referring to Australia, New Zealand, and problems with hospitality. There's not enough chefs either. So whether that will be a problem that's coming to a pub in Australia near you soon.
We hope not.
It already is. So, for example, in wine regions and in a lot of other places in the cities as well, restaurants are either not opening or only half opening because they just don't have the hospitality staff or the kitchen staff to be able to actually operate at full capacity.
So bearing in mind this, the whole message of we're in such a candidate short market, I thought it was very interesting when we came to the tech portion of the survey, which was provided by our company Vincere, to see that a few takeaways. Number one is that COVID has accelerated investment into tech stacks. It's leapfrogged digitization of small, medium and large firms in ANZ. 60% of the respondents invested in new websites, 52% of them invested in a website and or a CRM. Interestingly, the third most popular investment in tech over the past 6 months in Australia and New Zealand has been in chat and collaboration tools. So 40% of the respondents have invested in a chat or collaboration tool. So that's things like Zoom, MS Teams, Slacks, ViniChat. But one thing that stood out for me is that 100% of the large companies, the enterprise firms who are in ANZ, they all invested in collaboration tools. They get it. They understand that in this work from home kind of dispersed situation that we find ourselves in and out of lockdowns, they understand that the firms that can keep collaboration going will keep making money. And it concerns me, but actually that the smaller firms might get a little bit left behind there unless they cotton on to that. But back to this idea of candidate short market, what I found fascinating is that 91% of respondents, their instinct is to go straight out onto LinkedIn, or 89% will go to Seek, above searching on their own database for candidates. So the first port of call, I was, recruiter raised, drilled into me, you must search the database before you go out, onto paid channels. And I found it fascinating that even in this environment of, scrambling for candidates, firms and the medium-sized firms are the worst. They're the ones who will go straight out to, hunt in the wild, as Ross Clennett put it, rather than farm their own database. And I found that really interesting. And when asked why searching the database isn't their first port of call, some very interesting stats came up. So 47% of respondents said that the recruiters don't know how to do detailed searches, can't use a search in the ATS. 45% of them said that the data that's in the CRM is flawed. So it's not tagged properly, or it's not keyworded. So what's the point in searching? And this is the one that really pained me. 42% said it's easier to post on a job board than it is to search the company's own database. And this is a rather sad fact. 26% of them said that not all candidates even make it on the database in the first place. So, obviously I'm a technologist. This wounds me to my heart because I see all of this money that agencies are kind of leaving on the table, all of those kind of hidden fees and placements that are in their own database. Rod, go on.
If I can jump in, it's a little bit more than that. It's not just the money they're leaving on the table, it's the damage they're doing to their brand, not servicing the correct candidates in the right way. And I think that does a disservice to the entire industry. And that, like you, I had it kicked into me. You search your database first, and then you advertise. Advertising was the last thing we did. We were trained how to find people, not just stick an ad out there. So I've got to agree with you that in the use of technology, if people are not harnessing the power of what they've got and prefer to keep going out and cutting new pastures green every time.
I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not kicking agencies and saying, oh gosh, you should be doing this. I think, the tech has a role to play for sure. But, if I was as an owner, if you're listening to this, my takeaways or my advice off the back of the survey would be, COVID has accelerated tech investment. Your competitors, the survey's showing your competitors are investing in tech. If you're not, don't think that you're standing still. You're getting left behind. So think about that. Number two would be remove these excuses from your consultants to not use the CRM. So invest in tech that's easy for them to use, that they can search.
And train.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got to invest in this. It's a constant. It's not a kind of, okay, we'll just put something new in and leave it. It doesn't work that way, guys. And the third one would be, consultants will come and go and lockdowns will come and go. The pandemic will come and go. It'll be a distant memory soon, we hope. But your data, if you look after it, will look after you. And the survey's really shone a light on that, I think, Rod. The market's bouncing back, great. But what are you doing tech-wise to ensure you can get a slice of that pie?
I have when we talk about the recruitment industry, there are 8,000 or 9,000 recruitment companies in Australia, and I imagine the breakdown of this would be similar in the UK, Adam. The majority of recruitment companies are actually less than 10 people and older than 10 years. So we've actually got a very stable, mature rump of the, I don't mean that in the bad way, of the recruitment industry, which is very, very mature in terms of years, but very small and possibly haven't maintained the desire or the even the capability of keeping up with the technology and doing the things that are necessary. We tend to focus on startups, fast growth and large companies. I mean, that's what we all tend to talk about, and we tend to get excited about the case studies for those organisations. But that's not actually where the majority of the recruitment industry is in Australia. And I think one of the challenges is just the rate of change of technology and other compliance issues in the industry, and the impact that has on those smaller, more mature organisations of being able to just constantly keep up with that rate of change is really, really hard. So it doesn't surprise me when things become less efficient or get out of sync or fade away a little bit in terms of the discipline and so on, or the use of technology or whatever it may be, because it's really, really hard to do that if you're the owner of a small company and you're doing that for year after year after year and trying to keep up with that.
Louise, there's one other aspect of this that's going to be absolutely vital going forward, and that is remote working. You referred to it, and it's been very popular up till now, but Rod referred to the importance of training. You referred to how you learned what to do in the office. Now, the big question for the next year or two is, do you have your staff in the office? Do you let them work from home 2 or 3 days a week? If you do that, how do you get that training in place? And I'm sure Rod has some interesting things to say about that.
Maybe Nigel does.
I think it's a nightmare. We've got a situation where historically we've all grown up in a lively environment where we enjoy and thrive from each other's company, and that we see and learn from other good people around us. That all falls apart when we all have to work remotely. It doesn't just rub off on you because you're not sat next to someone and you don't hear it anymore. I think this is a whole new world and challenge that companies have really got to find the right answer to, because keeping and retaining your consultants whilst enabling them to grow, I think is going to be the major challenge for the year ahead. that engagement, enablement throughout what are undoubtedly going to be tough times. I mean, we've just gone into an instant lockdown, a sixth. And that's not going to go away. So we've got to find a way to engage and enable people remotely and in the office, but you've got to make your mind up where you truly do sit on that, because working from home isn't right for everyone. For some people it is, who've got the time and the space and the equipment. For others who are sharing with 2 or 3 other recruiters, it's a nightmare. It's not right for everyone. But I think that you've nailed it. This is the big one that will be one of the big definers for a company about their future, is how do we hold and harness our team for the future in an ever-changing environment of real and virtual. And that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things, that the extremes that have been written about in the paper, because it's a topical conversation, will not occur, and most organisations will find some sort of a middle ground that suits them. So it's unlikely to be 40 hours unregimented times back in the office, but it's also unlikely to be complete remote work. I think Nigel's summarised it really well, that as humans we enjoy each other's company, we do learn off each other, and the benefit of social interaction is really, really important from a work productivity point of view. And so however organisations go about that, but core times, regular meetings and all those sorts of things, aided by technology and great processes, and great discipline, because discipline is required, will get us through this. But it probably won't go back to 40 hours a week in the office, and it probably won't go to a complete distributed environment.
I think the companies who own their strategy on this, whether it's completely work from home, a hybrid, or completely in the office, whatever's right for them, it's your business. You do as what's right for you and the people that you're hiring. I think the ones who have a defined strategy are the ones who will kind of win in attracting the right talent.
It's not something you can drift into. You're really going to have to make a conscious decision and then set up all of the components to make it work. And we all work in remote ways. I look at around us, Adam with his half his people that he deals with on the other side of the world, and especially you, Eloise. I haven't seen my guys much at all. I haven't seen my New Zealand colleague for 18 months now. So we're all having to learn how to do some things a little bit differently. But one of the nice things that has come out of this last 18 months is that things that business owners said was impossible, and that's not the way we do things around here, have been forced into taking a broader strategic approach. And so there's a lot of things that are now on the table and open for discussion that were not even considered previously. And outsourcing is one of those. Improved technology is another one of those. There's all sorts of processes and strategic options that should have been considered because they've been tried and proven in other parts of the world and in other industries, and now they're being discussed. So that's a great outcome from COVID.
I 100% agree with that. Let's move on now to the M&A portion of the survey. So Rod, what's been the impact of COVID on the M&A market in ANZ, or more specifically, how are we looking to have recovered in the past 6-month period?
Yeah, so M&A didn't really go away, and there's two sides to M&A, right? You've got to have a buyer and a seller, and in general, the buyers stayed in the marketplace. They may have been a little more cautious, they may have changed their selection criteria a little bit, and so on. The challenge was that the sellers, which are usually smaller private companies, I said acted like turtles to somebody the other day. Maybe that's a good description. They all pulled their head in and said, don't talk to us. We're dealing with everything else at the moment. We're uncertain of the future. We can't forecast. We don't want to be talked about in terms of somebody coming in and approaching our business. And obviously that's changed. Now people are able to forecast. They're quite confident of the future. And so people are rebuilding their P&L lines. They're confident with where they're going to be going over the next period. And so transactions are now being talked about and are rising month by month. So we are really bullish with not only the rate of return of that, but what might lead out over the next few years. If a couple of reasons for that. One is that once we get the borders open, the international interest in Australia and New Zealand will continue, and it has for the last decade and will continue in the future. Specifically, free trade agreement, and we'll come back to that later, I think. And then across Australia and New Zealand, there's a lot of companies that are have grown well, got cash in the bank, they've got plans they want to execute, and they're just going to go and do it. And so there's opportunities. And finally, there's still the baby boomers out there that eventually need to retire. And so there is just a period where those guys will be thinking about what to do with their businesses.
I think they've earned their retirement now after this past year. Just go and have a cocktail, guys. Go to Bali and join Nigel.
If they want to go out on a high, then the next couple of years is probably the time to think about that, because it is a pretty good time in the marketplace and should continue for the next while.
You mentioned briefly just the UK-Australia free trade agreement, and there's one with the UK and New Zealand, the trade deal as well. What impact do you think that will have on the market? One for the table. Maybe you, Adam, have some thoughts.
So in the short term, absolutely no impact whatsoever. Just because we can't get there and you can't get here. Longer term, obviously, some impact on the farming community with the UK, with the restriction on doing some farm work as part of your working visa being now abolished. So farmers in Australia are going to be looking for a different source of labour, and anybody who supplies that is going to be maybe looking north rather than to the UK. Longer term, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. I was looking at the visa numbers, and inward to Australia, you've got about 3,500 skilled workers in 2019. Look at 2019 as the best year to compare with. The other way, you've got 3,700 Australians moving to the UK on skilled visas. I was fascinated. There's 23 religious workers and 4 gentlemen's gentlemen. So the numbers aren't going to be huge. I think more than the free trade agreement, Brexit will have an effect on UK businesses in looking to Australia and New Zealand as markets that are like us. Now, I know that there's huge differences, but Rod's already referred to the number of workers in the industry who go one way or the other. And I think that's going to have more of an impact, that firms are going to be looking at Australia and New Zealand for an opportunity. The free trade agreement, yeah, it's not going to have that much effect. It's more the closure of Europe, but there's also always opportunities for Australians coming to the UK.
I think over time, when we go back to maybe where we were pre-European Union involvement of Australian qualifications being more easily recognised in the UK, I think that'll lead to a greater flow of people backwards and forwards between the countries, and that's defined within the free trade agreement, I think, as well as some easier investment. And so I expect a gradual build up of time. Like you, Adam, I think that the withdrawal from the European Union allows business owners to look at other places a little more easily. And you know, it's not quite getting the gang back together in terms of the Commonwealth, but I would expect more investment between Commonwealth countries in the future. And the recruitment industry between the UK and Australia is so strong already. There's so many people in Australia who've got their start in the UK recruitment industry, such as Nigel, and we'd certainly expect more investment to follow that backwards and forwards involvement. So I'm pretty bullish, but like you, it means nothing now because we can't leave the country.
What's interesting is that in spite of us going in and out of lockdowns in ANZ right now, we're all feeling quite optimistic about the market. So if you're an owner and you're listening, plenty to be cheerful and bullish about. When's the next survey out, Rod?
Only every 6 months, because it's a very distracting process to my work life, I can tell you. But every 6 months. So we'll have at the end of November another survey. We'll keep some questions the same because we're always looking for the trend data to see what people are saying. But we always have a special focus as well. And I think there'll be some of the strategic things we've talked about today that business owners have on their mind will be what we'll focus on in the next survey.
Well, thanks for inviting Vincere, SIA and Staffing Industry Metrics to support you in it. I always say this, Rod, but the ANZ industry is lucky to have you because you do this, you put this incredible data out. If I was an owner, you know, this is the stuff that can really help steer good business decisions. So thank you. I don't know if people say thank you to you enough, Rod, but thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Adam, ever so much for joining today. Until the next survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.